Well, Miss Kenyatta, it is truly an honor and a pleasure to have you here on our Cami Teacher podcast. I know I'm like, I try not to scream and, go all fangirl on you, but I might. So for those of our guests, those wonderful guests that we have, those wonderful listeners that don't know who you are, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So my name is Kenyatta Forbes. I'm a former educator. I used to teach with Chicago Public Schools for nearly 10 years. I currently work on the pedagogy team for Google for Education, and I'm also a card game designer as well.
Fascinating. Card game. Now, of all things, how did you get to card games? Now, what led you there?
Well, I think as a teacher, I'd always use gamification in my classroom. It's one of the best tools really to get students engaged and really connect with them. So I'm not a stranger to using games for learning. And so the card game was just kind of a natural progression of what I was used to doing with students.
Now, interestingly, we did a podcast on gamification in education, and we used tech for a lot of those things, but I never would have thought to use card games for that. So that's interesting. So wow, that's good. Now
100%.
It's Black History Month in February, but today we want to talk about the importance of teaching and celebrating Black History Month, period. Can you tell us why this is so important?
Yeah, I think especially where we are in the world in these times, I'm just going to blanket and make that super general. But I think it's really important to be as inclusive as possible and celebrate diversity, right? And so Black History is really a time set aside to really dive into Black culture, whether it be people who contributed to the culture, food, just the rich history that's there. So for me, it's just all about having that moment to pause and reflect and be appreciative.
That is so awesome to hear. First of all, that you work for Chicago Public Schools. I have looked at their schools. I work with a lot of their schools since I take care of the Midwest. My hat's off to you. My utmost respect. Now, reflecting back on those 10 years, congrats, by the way, of you being in the classroom, what are some quick tips that you can give teachers for integrating Black History Month into any lesson, no matter where they're teaching, whether it's in Texas, where I'm at, Louisiana, where Corey's at, or even in Chicago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to make it engaging is always to make it as concrete, but also relatable, right? So if you're in Texas, find Black figures, whether contemporary or historical, that students can connect to. If you have a student that's deeply interested in science from a particular state, find a scientist, Black African American or Black scientist to connect. So it's really just about being very responsive to local leaders, and really bring it into the now for them.
So honestly, I was loving your idea because I was thinking back. So I did see that Vice clip of your game Trading Races. How did you come up with these historical features if we're going to try to relate them to, like, for somebody like me that's in Texas, Louisiana? How did you come up with those characters or those persons, and how could we switch it up for our demographics?
Yeah, that's a super great question. So to be honest with you, it was a little bit tricky at first. The game initially, like the prototype of it, was, dare I say, kind of too Black, and there wasn't enough diversity within the deck to be able to have interesting or conversations or debates or discussions. So I actually took a step back and looked at a general playing deck of cards. So you have 54 cards in a regular playing deck, right? So you have your jokers, you have, your sets of spades, diamonds, clubs, hearts, right? And so if Corey, I don't know if you play spades before, but you have a hierarchy. You have a hierarchy within spades. And so what I ended up doing is using the mechanisms of spades as my guiding point and figuring out who could actually be representative in this game. And so you have certain figures who what could be considered like the highest card, like a Joker, like maybe a Martin Luther King, and you have lower value cards, right? And so using that as a framework, I begin to kind of plug and play people in terms of like flipping that, if you will, on its access to make it more of a localized and a game in which students can connect to because it's people within their local region. Super simple. You do the same exact thing. And even for educators, what I've done is there's facilitation guides for high school and also college level professors to use the game in their classroom or their educational spaces. And one of the activities is actually students will create their own set of cards using this kind of concept as well.
Wow.
I love
That
it.
is awesome. Now that took some thinking there. Wow. And you mentioned inclusivity earlier because a lot of people they have a tough critique of Black History Month and they think that it's just us and no one else. You know, can you speak to, because you mentioned that
Yeah.
you made sure it was a part of the game. So can you just talk about how, you know, that maybe relates to the greater picture of education
Yeah.
and how, you know, that just, you just elaborate on that maybe a little?
Yeah. I mean, I think like even if pulling it outside of education, you can't do anything in life in isolation.
There you
Right. Like
go.
if I'm making a cake, I can't do the icing in isolation from the cake, and I can't do the cake from so everything kind of comes together at some point. And so even though there's a celebration of Black history, it's still American history. It's a subset
Yeah.
within a larger bank, right? So you
Yeah.
can't separate that. And I think it's I wouldn't call it unfortunate, but I do see other cultures or other races or ethnicities uh, take a step back from Black History Month when I feel like they should actually be taking a step forward. Um, it's an opportunity to learn about another culture, about important figures within that culture. So I think it's also like it's basically a missed opportunity for everybody to celebrate.
100% agree with that statement. I am so glad that you brought it up because you are correct. Like, for example, for me, when it is Hispanic Heritage Month, which happens in October, we get really focused on just one group, not realizing that we were actually, influenced by different cultures. And if we just
Hmm.
stop teaching in isolation and start,
Yeah.
where did we get this from and where do we get this from? Like, it would be such a different world that we would live in.
And on the topic of Black History Month, because I know each year they pick a theme. So this year's theme is Black Resistance, which
Hmm.
looks at how African Americans have fought oppression from America's earliest days. And Black resistance can take on many forms, from seeking knowledge and creating art to encouraging political action and more. So what does the phrase Black resistance mean to you?
It's what comes to mind first is resilience.
Mm.
Um, so I think like that it's there's a natural hesitation when people hear the word resistance because you think, oh, an opposition of, but it actually to me is more about the resilience and the kind of like vivaciousness of the culture to continue to be creative and develop um, from food to music. I mean, like you can go on and on, right? So I feel like that's what it means to me. It's just it's an expression of the resilience of a culture.
And I imagine, being from Chicago and working with Google, you've probably had a lot of opportunities and you've probably seen a lot of things and you've probably had the opportunity to participate with a lot of art and a lot of food and all those different things. So how would those things have shaped the way you see our expression? And how do you think the Black expression has evolved over the years, to fit inside of what you see today, you know?
Oh God, that's a lot. I feel like that's a longer conversation.
Probably
um,
so. Probably so.
but if I had to like give a little bit of a one or two liner there, I mean, it's all about the evolution. Um, I think about what comes to mind first is just like the evolution of music within Black culture, um, and how it's actually influenced other music as well. But starting from the beginning, you had the blues, which turned into jazz, which turned into like hip hop, which turned into R&B, you know what I mean? And so there's always this like iteration of creativity that's happening, this evolution. And I feel like that happens throughout. You look at food, historically, during enslavement, slaves were provided with the scraps. And those scraps became the foundation of many of the staples of Black food, right? Now, I don't personally eat chitlins, but you know what I mean?
Me either,
But
girl.
that, but that's a staple that was, an evolution of like,
Right.
okay, we're going to take this, and it kind of goes back to that resilience piece. I'm going to take this, I'm gonna shape it up to be my own. I'm going to be resilient, and I'm going to move forward with this thing and make it new, make it us. And so I see that happening throughout the culture in many different capacities.
When you're speaking to that, I finally sat down to watch the Elvis movie with Aaron Butler and Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
And then it just got me like going on this whole trip because I was telling the guys that I got a record player. So then I was looking for vinyls. And Elvis always said, I'm not trying to take anything from their culture. I love it. I want to bring it mainstream. And this is what I love. This is what I've been influenced by. And it was so crazy to read that from him saying, hey, I'm not trying to steal. I love what you guys are doing. And that's why I'm trying to copy it. It's like the most flatter. What do they say?
Imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that was so awesome on his part. I was like, wow, this is a whole new side of Elvis I did not know.
I think it's like, speaking of that, I think what it comes down to is that there's a difference between appropriation and appreciation.
Yep.
And sometimes that line can be really, really thin, depending on the expression that comes through. But I think that's the piece that some people don't stop to say, well, am I actually appreciating this culture or am I appropriating this culture?
That's
and
so good.
If you're on the appropriation side, there might be some reevaluation that needs to happen there.
That is so cool. Yeah. And I think teachers also need to understand that. Like, I think you hit the nail right on the head where it's appreciation versus appropriation. So speaking of teaching 10 years, what was or what is your favorite memory of teaching Black history? Whether that was at school, at Google, with your card game, what is like your absolute standout memory?
That's God, out of 10 years. This is kind of general one, so it's not specific to one, but I can think of a couple different instances in which students were so surprised that somebody who looked like them were responsible for something major, right? That contributed to the world at large. I think that a lot of the time there isn't enough representation so students can see themselves in XYZ, whether that be in science or in math or in art. And so seeing, right, that is often an eye opener. Or I do recall once I had a student who was really passionate about painting, but didn't think that he could be successful in this capacity and make a life from it. And so I showed him Basquiat. And I think a year or two before that, one of Basquiat's paintings had sold for like $30 million or something crazy like that. And so he was really shocked to see that somebody who looked like him had the capacity to be successful in the art world and have his paintings be sold as masterpieces as well. So it's just those kind of moments that are really touching to see happen. Because students then can see themselves and do the things they dream of doing.
That is so, I know, that is so awesome. So would you go back to teaching?
Ooh, that's a great,
You're like, I like my benefits at Google.
It's different. And I tell people like, it's not about, there is no greater joy than teaching. It was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had in my life. You get to be a part of watching somebody grow into who they're going to be for the rest of their lives. You are making an impact on a student in unimaginable ways because you only get to see them for that year. And I often get like messages to be like, "You were my third grade teacher, and I'm doing and you because of you." And I'm like, "It was all you. I was just, you know, what I'm saying, I was facilitating your. It was you." Um, so it's a rewarding experience. But what I'm doing now has the ability to have impact on a macro level, right?
Yeah.
Previous to this position I'm in now, but before that I was working on Google Classroom. And so, you know, there's over 160 million users, right? And so having that sort of scale and supporting students and teachers really in a different way, it's just also rewarding, but in a different way. So it's hard to say that I'm not going to say, they say never.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like my impact is so much greater right now. And that I have the ability to do that, right? So why not take it?
You know what, Miss Kenyatta? I hope that somebody out there listens to the podcast and they listen to this answer in particular, because I think this could inspire so many people out there to go into
Oh,
teaching.
most definitely.
I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm ready to go back. I'm good. I needed this little pep talk.
Yeah.
That's an
Kids
awesome
are
answer.
awesome, and they humble you. I think that that's the thing I miss too. I definitely got humbled a couple times, but my teaching style was like, I was a teacher who was like, you know, so if a kid did something and I didn't know how they did, I'd be like, show me, you know, teach
Yeah.
me. And so I had a very open classroom. Um, I never really subscribed to power dynamics, not my thing, but I loved that we could learn from each other, you know.
I can tell your kids loved you, and I can tell they loved being in your classroom. Wow. Well, you've given us some examples of some do's, and you referenced a very good Black History teacher moment to do. So could you offer some teachers maybe some examples of some things to do and maybe some don'ts when it comes to teaching Black history in their classrooms?
Yeah. Do's, your research. Um, Especially if you want to make it localized, you know, to your city, to your state, right? Know your students, right? So if you have that kid who's super into science, find a couple figures for that, you know, that kid. So make it relatable. And if you're specific to a content, you know, if you're a reading teacher, science teacher, math teacher, right? Do all the things. Also, try not to get into the tropes. I think people often rest on like Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman. Go a little bit more obscure, right? So stay away from those kind of iconic. Not that they're great, they're amazing, but dive a little bit deeper. There's a vast amount of people you could talk about, um, and then don't be afraid. You don't have to look a particular way to teach Black history.
Mm.
So I think that's probably like the number one. Don't leave that up to people of color, especially if you're the teacher in that room. So engage in it. Don't appreciate, not appropriate. So don't appropriate the culture. You don't have to. We don't want to see anything on the news about a teacher showing up in blackface or anything. You don't have to do any of that to get your message across. um, Sorry, why are you? My dog's right here. And then what else? Don't don't be scared of getting it wrong. I think that that's also, especially if you're not a person of color. There's a fear of saying or doing the wrong thing, even though I just said don't appropriate. But it's a little bit of a nuance here. It's okay to make mistakes, and if you do, kids will probably correct you, but
They will.
that's okay, right? It's all a learning experience, and everything is also evolving. Our language is also evolving, and so try to keep up with that. There's nuance in things like colored person of color, right? There's nuance there, so make sure you're keeping up with those things. And then Oh, going back to the do's, have fun. Sorry, have fun. So that's my do's and my don'ts.
I am Mexican American, so usually we're a minority, and then in Texas, we're kind of wonky out here. But I really love that you're putting it out there. Like, don't be afraid. You're giving us all these little tips and tricks. And I think my favorite was do your research. Favorite. And I think that's a great tip everywhere. So, for teachers that are just trying to figure out where to start, because it can be like super overwhelming. Like, you get on Google, you're going to find a lot of stuff out there.
Mm.
Do you have any resources or activities that anybody can incorporate into their classrooms to facilitate a conversation for Black History Month?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of there's a vast amount of resources. Array 101. I'm not sure if you've heard of them before. It's Ava DuVernay's
Oh,
initiative, but she has a lot of curriculum that they've put together, some around some of the films that she's made, but some around historical incidents that have happened. But there's an entire curriculum for students or for teachers to facilitate the students. I also love Conscious Kid. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but they've got a great book selection um, hub resources for teachers. Um, what else? What else? Let me think. Um, Google for Education also has a Black History and Culture and Identity lesson plans. It's within the Applied Digital Skills sect of stuff. So if you go to Applied Digital Skills, and then you should see a Black Culture, Black History link, and then there's like I think over 15 lessons that are dedicated just to Black history. Of course, I got to plug Google, and then who else? EJI um, also has resources where you can um, basically it's just an entire lesson plan. I believe EJI is specialized to high school though, but their content is nothing short of amazing. So it's also where you can go as well. But there's a ton of resources. It's out there. And literally, if you just put in Black History curriculum, select your grade band in Google, a ton of stuff will pop up.
thank you.
Fantastic.
That is so. I must say, I do love Google Applied Digital Skills. I wish you guys had come up with it just a smidgy sooner. Because I thought, yeah, I can teach my kids how to do a Google Sheet. I can teach them how to do conditional formatting. No, I
Yeah, yeah,
cannot.
yeah. It's great.
So the
It's
digital
fantastic.
skills, love it, love it, love it. And those are such great tips. Thank you. Trust me, teachers out there are going to love all the tips that you are giving them, all the resources. Thank you so much for all of that.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And they're going to love this Trading Races game. So, how can they get their hands on it? Where can they go to find it?
Well, you can grab Trading Races. There's two places. You can either get it on Amazon, or you can get it directly from tradingracesgame.com. If you do go to tradingracesgame.com, I do have a discount code for educators. So it's just the word educators in all caps, and you'll receive, I think it is 10 or 15%. I think it's 15% off your order. Also on the website, you'll get a link to the facilitation guides for high school and college level. Working currently on a middle school level guide, but the high school level easily can be reformatted or redesigned pretty quickly for middle schoolers as well.
I am looking forward to seeing how this would be incorporated, and I would love to hear stories. I would love to see, I wish somebody would record a lesson to see this live and in action. Is this somewhere like, is there like a recording of it? Have you seen it?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to be a part
I
of
saw it
one.
on HBO. You need to go Google. It's on YouTube. Just hit HBO Vice Trading Races. And it's like it shows a different variety. I was just like when they threw out Justin Bieber on the deck of cards, I was like, what? Wait, what? I was just like,
Yeah.
that is I loved it. And it just shows how to start the conversation. I think for me that was like when I was going through that clip, I was like, this is a great way just to start a conversation.
I want to see more of an initiative, to see more, people doing it and just see more of the reaction, because I think we always want to teach empathy. And I think that's a big thing. And I would just love to see more of that conversation being started with this game. So I just think it's just a wonderful opportunity.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
But you know what I was thinking? Since it's still not out there for middle school, those middle school teachers can use a facilitation guide and have the kids create their own deck of cards, and just like they can use that as the guide. Like, hey, look, here are some samples. Here are some things that you could do with it. And it just turns it into a whole nother activity for the little middle schoolers. And they're usually way more creative than the high school ones anyway. They still have a childlike imagination in them.
True. They're still very open.
Yes.
Most definitely.
All right. So, Miss Kenyatta, how would you recommend to our listeners to celebrate and support Black History Month in the classroom?
I would recommend, of course, my game, but beyond my
love it. Everybody go get it.
Yeah, selfless
go
plug.
Get it.
Go.
Besides my game, of course, I would say I would recommend, I like to stay away from the traditional kind of assignments. And so I like a little bit more creative stuff. So whether that be, writings, like poetry, paintings, even doing a podcast, right, about what they learned about a particular person. So I'm a little bit on the creative side. I'm more of the show what you know, not like write a paper type of person. So I think like giving students the opportunity to like find a person that they connect with within Black history, whether that's contemporary, or a contemporary figure or a historical figure, but who was that person and why? So if I had to do that assignment for myself, I would probably pick somebody like James Baldwin, right? I think he's just prolific and amazing, and I would have loved the opportunity to like have coffee with him. And so like exploring that, why do I connect to James Baldwin? What would I say to him? What questions would I ask him? What reflections do you think he would have had on current times? How would he encourage you? So maybe even like a conversation with this person, what would that look like? So just changing that traditional, like write a paper about this, make it a little bit more interactive. So identify a person, help the student connect with that, and then push it into a creative space.
Like Cammie.
There you go.
We're all
I see what you did there. Love it.
We are collaborating here.
Hey, I'm just saying,
And then if you make the Trading Racist cards digital, we can put them on there as well.
There you go. It's all in a book,
working it together. There we go.
Yeah. So talking about the classroom, tell me your favorite assignment that you gave your kids or that your kids just came up with on their own. What was like your favorite thing that you saw come from them?
Black history related or just in general?
In general, because I think we could probably like make it into a Black history general.
Yeah. My students created original songs and then made music videos to them. And that was super fun.
Wow. That is awesome.
Yeah, it was a good time, not gonna lie.
As my kids would say, that's dope.
Yeah, it was
Don't
fun.
hurt yourself trying to be a youngin' to Corey. Don't hurt yourself now.
Yeah, so we did a bunch of that. They were into it, and who am I to get in the way of what they want to do? So I literally let them. Yeah, I just facilitated. I put a link in there if you're interested in watching it one day. But yeah, that was really fun to see them, write the lyrics, do the music, and then shoot it and edit it. So I was like, let's do it.
And just tell them, remember me when you're rich and famous. I got you started.
I need 10%.
Definitely. I discovered you.
Oh my goodness. And you had a message for teachers of how to get students to celebrate and how teachers can celebrate in their classrooms. How can individuals in their own lives celebrate Black history?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, Chicago. I don't live in Chicago anymore, but Chicago is definitely one of the most segregated cities. Um, and now I currently live in Oakland, and my block in Chicago, in contrast to where I live on my block in Oakland, is so drastically different. So in Chicago, I'm used to walking out and being solely around individuals who look exactly like me. And in Oakland, there's a huge level of diversity within just my own block, like within just across like it's hugely diverse. And so, I guess depending on where you live as an individual, I would say engage with your neighbors, right? Get to know who they are as people, as individuals. Um, and then, come together and, celebrate together, if you will. Um, there are a number of things, especially in Oakland. There's a lot of celebrations that are going to happen surrounding Black history. Involve yourself in those things, right? Go to them, show up to those things, and learn, talk to people, and get to know the culture. So if you're not of the culture and you're curious about it, go to those celebrations to learn. Um, there's always going to be somebody who's willing to talk to you about what that food is, or what that dance is, or kente club, whatever it may be. If somebody's going to tell you what that is, so I would just say engage, right, and learn.
So
What a
you
message.
are a brand new mom.
Yeah.
Congratulations. How are you going to incorporate this? How are you going to teach your little one like about Black History Month, about the culture? How are you going to incorporate that into your family?
Oh, he's already so it's a little boy. That's, I guess, already happening in a way. So he's only 8 weeks old, but I think right now that's happening through music, right? And so, his like wake up song is like Bob Marley, and then his bath time is Sade. So he's getting Black history right now through music. We sing Stevie Wonder songs to him. So
Um,
right now it's just it's focused on that, and then as he gets older, it'll be through through food. Then it'll be through other influences. We've got a few books that are um, culturally diverse, in terms of like, the skin I'm in. So it talks about race. So they're all age appropriate, but um, doing things in a way that can be influencing his daily life, right? And that kind of goes back to like Black history is in isolation to a month, but this happens it can happen on a daily basis too.
Most
I love
definitely.
that. I think I love that because I think teachers go home, and I don't think we ever stop being teachers. I don't care if you're at home, if you're at Google, if you're in the park, the
Yeah.
mall. I think a part of us will always want to teach. So you letting
Always.
those parents that are teachers, hey, you could do this at home too. I think that was such great advice. And you
Yeah.
look so dang good for 8 weeks, girl. I would have been like on the bed, like, Lord, take me now. I'm good.
Oh,
I
so
thought you were
funny.
gonna say he's 8 months or something like that.
No, no, yeah, it's. I had a friend come to town 2 weeks after he was born, and I went to pick her up from the airport, and she's like, "How are you driving a car?" And I'm like,
That was the same
"What
question
am
that
I
came.
supposed to do after? I'm supposed to lay in bed? I don't get it." So yes, thank you for the compliment. Yeah.
You are one strong, strong lady.
Do you have anything else that you would like to share with us? Any other thoughts about Black History Month or Black history in general, or about education or technology, or just
Yeah, I
Being
mean,
a
just the
mom and working.
that part, right? I'm just excited. I feel like uh, since everything kind of happened, at least for the states in 2020, concerning um, Black Lives Matter, I think people have a very different approach to Black culture in general, and so I think I'm just filled with enthusiasm and excitement because I saw over the last 2 years, really a lot of corporations, organizations, educational places, really investing in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so for me, this is just like Black History Month just gets to be a culmination of all of that hard work that I see lots of people as individuals, but corporations, organizations doing as a whole too.
Most definitely. There's definitely been a collective push to come
Yeah, it's
together.
a shift. Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. And a welcome one at that.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. And
long
overdue.
And long overdue. Yeah. And long overdue.
Yeah.
I can't agree more. Yeah. But this time it's been super appreciated. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate than with this thought that we have been centered around in this moment. And we really appreciate this time with you. Thank you for this. And thank you for your contributions to education as a whole. And I just know that the education world has been blessed by what you have shared with us on today. So thank you so much, Kenyatta. We really appreciate
My
this.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. Please keep doing what you're doing. Keep influencing people. Keep pushing it. And every now and then it's okay to chill with your baby.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.